You know, when you're having sex with someone and you notice something off about their body and you're like, do I keep going? Do I say something and ruin the moment? Well, that's how our story starts.
Great. We're jumping right in.
Yeah. There was this one time you and I were having sex and you were on top of me. And I just noticed your neck was like so thick. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't get it out of my head. I couldn't focus on anything else. And I was like, do I say something and like ruin this moment and nobody has a good time? Or do I just keep going? And I just kept going because that felt like the right thing to do in the moment.
I have to say, that is very gracious of you to have that on your mind, to notice something that is obviously off within me. And you're like, you know what? I'll just let him pound away and I'll go into this at a later time.
Hi, I'm Lauren.
Hi, I'm Alex.
And this is our story. And this is where it starts.
Welcome to Hopefully Kidding.
So this is our podcast about our fertility journey, which is a term I don't love and have some alternatives I will be sharing along the way.
Good luck not using it, though.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try.
Okay.
It just feels a little corny, a little chat GBT for me in this moment. I've listened to a lot of fertility podcasts as we've been going through this, and I just feel like there's a few things missing from the space that you and I can add and hopefully help other people who are on the same journey.
Okay, so what are you thinking?
So there's not a ton of humor out there in fertility podcasts, right? It's a sensitive subject. A lot of the podcasts I listened to were very like, hey, Mama Bear, it's okay. And sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you just want to be coddled. But other times you just want to like talk about what's real and what's going on. And that I didn't see that so much out there.
I get that. I mean, I listened to a couple of fertility podcasts that you sent me, and I will say this. What I felt was missing, obviously, the humor, because honestly, people aren't making enough dead baby jokes out there around their miscarriages. But also, I felt like I was not being spoken to as the male partner. I think almost everything was dominated by female conversation. And even when you sent me a couple that were a couple speaking to each other, I still really didn't feel like my side of the story was being told. So I wanted to express my feelings and my emotions, which is something that I'm not shy about.
No, I actually think that's like one of your best qualities is that you're a feelings man, right? You know how to talk about your feelings. You know how to feel your feelings. You're not someone who shuts down and doesn't talk when you're going through something. I hope that you can help other men or anybody who's struggling with their feelings, expressing their emotions to, relate to you and feel the things you've been through.
Yeah, I've never been in a fight in my entire life. I beat up a journal pretty much every single morning. I am very vulnerable, and it's one of the qualities that I lead with. And I think one of the qualities that actually attracted you to me was that I'm not afraid to feel things and to express my current emotions.
Yeah, and I think like I'm kind of the opposite. I can be a robot. I could be cold. I can be calculating. I'm much more a logical person, a make a to-do list, get things done versus like, hey, let's sit and talk about it. In the typical gender dynamics, you don't see that as often. So hopefully, again, we could maybe help some people who are navigating something similar.
Yeah, and you did mention that there's not a lot of humor in the podcast. And as a comedian, that is my strong suit. With every difficult thing in life, my coping mechanism is to make jokes about it, no matter what happens. And I will say that you will hear a lot of inappropriate jokes from me on this, every once in a while from you, probably too. Mm-hmm. But more so, I'm the one that always has to cut in and go, hang on a second, I've got a silly to make. And you have to go, Alex, not the fucking time.
Well, this is the time.
Good.
Some other things that I feel like aren't talked about enough is the financial toll of it all. You get podcasts, and this is not criticism. All these podcasts have helped me, but you get podcasts from people who are like famous or wealthy or just clearly money is not a huge concern where we want to be open and honest about this. We live in a 1,000 square foot apartment in Los Angeles. We are not independently wealthy. Luckily, our parents have helped us out while we've been going through this. Finances are a huge concern as we continue along this path.
Yeah, fertility is expensive as a whole. I will say this. I hate every 17-year-old who gets pregnant by accident on their first try. I really don't like these people. On top of that, though, we've already gone through one round of IVF, which we'll get into later. But already, I mean, we've spent upwards of $40,000-ish on fertility. And I equate it to we lit a car on fire, and not only did we not get to drive it, we didn't even get to watch it burn. Somebody just came in and said, hey, yeah, your car's all burned up. Did you want to get another car? And I'm like, what? We didn't even get in the seat. Like, we got nothing out of that. Yikes. All right. So it's something, it heavily weighs on us when we have to make these decisions. And they say, hey, you ready for round 2? And we're like, wait a second. Because we could have traveled around the world for 6 months. And instead we ended up with heartbreak and frustration.
Another aspect that I don't feel represented in this world of fertility podcasts, which is definitely a whole world now, is women with bodies like mine. I'm not skinny. I'm not like severely overweight. I'm just sort of a regular size 14 type of person. That's something that every time I've gone to the doctor in my entire life has been a concern. And it's something I've been concerned about throughout this, and what my expectations were going in to see various fertility doctors, and was that going to be a concern? Were they going to tell me to lose weight? Were they going to tell me this? So I just want to talk about the realness of that as well, and that experience for me.
I didn't actually realize that was an issue, so I'm glad you brought it up, just because that's not something I think about, because I don't look at you and see anything other than a person I love. And so the fact that you feel that way, well, I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, and we'll get into it when it comes up.
I mean, let's face it, you already brought up my engorged neck, so if you're going to bring up your body as well, good. I'm glad we're on an even playing field.
Yeah, so that's what you're getting with this podcast. The realness. We're going to be vulnerable. We hope to bring some humor and some relatability to it all, so you don't feel so alone, because this journey can be so isolating.
You already said journey.
I know.
Told you it was going to happen all the time.
Think of us as like your fertility best friends. We want to be there for you and help make you not feel so alone during this process. We're putting everything on the table, and we hope that you can find some perspective in this. So should we tell them how we got here?
I think so. We can't just start there. So these people have no idea who we are. Let's back up a little bit.
Yeah. So we met in college.
About 20 years ago, Lauren and I met for the first time. We met in Pittsburgh, where we were going to school, and there was an instant connection between us. We never really declared ourselves as anything, mainly because we were in college. We didn't really know what we were. We were both kind of experimenting and fooling around. However, we always came back to each other. In fact, do you remember the first time we ever hooked up with each other?
The first time we hooked up, yes.
You do? Okay,
yes,
cool.
Yes.
Please indulge.
There was a dead fish there.
Wait, what? Oh, God. Oh, that's what you're thinking about. Oh, that's not even where I was going. You're talking about when we were on the water steps. We took a walk late at night. We were on the water steps and we started making out. And all of a sudden you were like, what is that smell?
Yes.
I forgot about that. Oh, no.
You said the first time we hooked up, and that was it.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, there was a dead fish from the Allegheny River very close by.
Somehow in this water feature, like, because it's basically a water fountain.
That's exactly what it is.
So how did a fish get in there?
Your guess is as good as mine.
My memory has it smoking a cigarette. Like someone put a cigarette butt in this fish.
Holy shit, you are exactly right.
Okay, that's actually what happened?
Yes, it was an unfiltered, unfished experience for us. That's totally what happened. I forgot about that. God, I'm glad we're doing this. Oh, wow. No, I was specifically referring not to the time when we saw a fish poisoning its lungs, its gills. However, I was thinking about the first time we actually had sex.
Okay, yes. Now, I remember that as well, but that is a completely different story.
Yeah, no. So what happened is we were moving out of the dorms because we were afraid we were going to get kicked out for drinking because we'd been caught too many times. Mm-hmm. And we we were getting a house for the first time ever. We found this awesome place, and we didn't have any furniture in it yet because we had just signed the lease. But we decided we were. I mean, how did we end up there? I don't even remember. We just ended up like in the front bedroom.
We used to we would have parties there even before we had the furniture, right? So there was no furniture, but we had like a CD player and 4 CDs. Do you remember what the CDs were?
I remember the OC soundtrack, so that pretty much tells you where we were, like 2005-ish, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and the Killers album, the Killers' first album.
For sure,
yeah. With Mr. Brightside. So we had like a CD player and then a couple of random Christmas decorations. It was the end of the semester. It was December. Our other roommate had brought this really cool vintage Christmas tree. It was like made out of silver tinsel. And it, instead of having lights on it, had like a light that pointed up at it and like spun different colors. Do you remember that?
I do remember, yeah.
Yeah. And we used to have parties there, right? Do you remember the parties with no furniture? Because like, what do you need furniture for at a college party?
Oh, definitely. We were just like, open house, squatters, everybody come in and get fucked up. It was so fun.
It was a lot of fun. We throwing parties is kind of something like a theme in our relationship.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we started throwing them back then, and we always wanted to be a party house. And I mean, we kept throwing parties for years, but let's keep here about the first time we had sex for a second.
Yes.
So we are in that room. We had a party, I believe. Everyone left, and you and I just started going at it in that room under the Christmas tree. If I recall, I did not wrap it up, even though it was the Christmas season.
Well, turns out 20 years later, might not have needed it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
Foreshadowing.
We didn't know that. But then we did move to the basement, and this is an unfinished Pittsburgh basement. This house was built in like the early 1900s. It was disgusting down there, and a place where only 2 drunk 19-year-olds should be having sex. I remember at one point I tried to like put you onto the washing machine because I had seen it in some like low grade Skinamax adult film, and I was like, this will be super hot, and I didn't know what I was doing, and we ended up just doing it on the floor. We're lucky we didn't get some kind of weird infection. Gross.
I definitely got like concrete burn on my knees. I remember this.
Oh, I mean, there were a lot of weird, like on the floor sexual position burns that we got in our time in college. I remember we broke into an apartment one time. It was in a different building, and people had moved out that we knew were living there, so we knew it was empty, and we just went in there into the carpet and just had sex on the floor. And I remember the next day you were like in so much pain.
I would like to correct you and say we did not break in. It was open. The door was literally open, and it was just this small apartment building, and we literally knew every single person that lived in there because it was right where everyone lived off campus as part of our college. So like we knew the people had moved out, and I think there was a couch in there.
Fair. I don't remember a couch in there, but fair enough. We did not smash our way in and break any laws. We basically, again, we're squatters. For just a few, we were squatting. However, when we were having sex, we were not squatting. We were laying. So yeah, that is, but that's the first time we really, really hooked up was in that, under that Christmas tree. And we just kind of kept doing that for a few years, throughout college. I mean, we were very, very close, but again, we just didn't declare ourselves as anything.
Yeah. And so after college, then I stayed in Pittsburgh for a year. You were still kind of finishing school at that point?
I was still finishing because I started a year after Lauren. I took a year off after high school, and then I went to Pittsburgh and started going to school there. And I was like just working as a tour guide, working as a server. But at the time, I was also like starting to audition for some acting stuff. And I joined the Screen Actors Guild while I was living there. So I knew I wanted to go to LA. I just had to save up money to be able to get there. So I just worked as hard as I could. And honestly, living in Pittsburgh at that time, like 2007, 2008, it was not hard to save money. Our rent was $300 a month.
Yeah.
It was great.
I was, at that time, I'd graduated and I was working at the Cheesecake Factory. So I ran the Cheesecake Factory in the South Side. And just like I could make rent in a day if I had to, like work a double. So it was a good life. But I ultimately decided I wanted to travel and adventure at that point. So I became an au pair and I went to Belgium at the same time you moved to Los Angeles.
Our separation was difficult because we really weren't sure if we were going to see each other again. And I went off to LA, you went off to Belgium, and I just started living the LA life immediately. I had a couple friends that already lived here, and so they were showing me the ropes, and I just loved being here. It was so great. And we kept up communication.
Yeah, via MySpace message.
Well, we are really dating ourselves. Like, we were listening to the OC soundtrack and messaging through MySpace. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. I was pretty miserable in Belgium. I was like stuck in the suburbs of Brussels with these like two very young kids and just like not really able to do anything. Like all that, the adventures and the travels that I sort of pictured myself weren't happening so much as just like domestic life, which at, 22 years old was not what I wanted at that time.
Especially because you had just come from being in college and we were very social, obviously. All of a sudden, you're thrust into the Belgian countryside with two very small children and you're not around people your own age. Sure, it could have been relaxing at another point in your life, but where you were, it just wasn't what you were seeking.
Yeah. I'm so grateful I did that because I did get to go, I traveled around and got, I have this experience and a great story about it. And, ultimately I left after 4 months because we'd been chatting and I decided and I moved home to Cleveland and worked at the Cheesecake Factory there to save up some money. And I came out and visited you in LA, which was the first time I went to California.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great.
Right. Especially, we're young people living in Los Angeles and I'm driving you around to the beaches and the mountains and everything, doing all of the quintessential, like, welcome to Los Angeles things. And I don't even think you'd ever been to California, right?
I hadn't. I went to Florida all the time as a kid because I had family there. And so I just kind of assumed, as a girl from Ohio, California and Florida were the same because, palm trees. Not the same at all. So different. And I was like, oh, this one's much better.
Yeah, I would say so. I've spent enough time in Florida and I love it for what it is, but I always knew I was a California boy at heart. I always wanted to live in California. And I mean, the second I got out here, I remember just thinking like, yeah, this is where I want to be. And I must have put it on full display for you because very quickly you were like, oh, I'm going to come out here too. And at first, I remember when you first moved out here, because I've been living here, I think like almost a year already when you actually made the move. And at first I was pretty resistant to us rekindling our relationship. I think I was trying to move on from it. And I just realized like the more you were around and my friends loved you, I was like, what am I doing? Like, look at what is right in front of you, Alex. This wonderful, beautiful person who you have so much compatibility with, such great energy. She's one of the funniest people you've ever met, one of the best people you've ever met. What are you waiting for? And then I just finally gave in and I was like, yeah, this is not going to get better. So let's go for it. And we did.
Yeah. I like to say, while you were so resistant to my wiles and my charm, you were also like sleeping over every weekend.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I used to do a joke like early on and where I was just like, I do not have a girlfriend. What I do have is a rent-free second apartment. And you fucking hated that joke so much. Understandably so. You should have hated that joke. But we actually made it an official thing. We were together. And the next few years of our life were just, wild. Like, what were you doing when you first moved out to Los Angeles, like work-wise? Because you did work at Cheesecake Factory for a little bit.
Right. I have now, at this point in the story, worked at my third Cheesecake Factory, the one here in LA at the Grove, which, thank you, Cheesecake Factory, for making it so easy for me to move across the country and have a job and,
Thank you, Da Vinci Pasta.
Yeah. But the other part of me moving out here was I was like, well, I could get into the entertainment business, which is somehow still related to the theater degree I got in college, even though I didn't want to be an actor. I knew that all the rejection was just not for me. But that's what I did. I just transitioned from, waiting tables to working in entertainment. I got an internship in a casting job, and then I got a full-time job at a talent agency, and then ultimately got what at the time was my dream job, which was working in casting at 20th Century Fox TV. It was all the things I wanted to do at the time. And like, meanwhile, we're going to music festivals all the time. We moved in together with roommates, and then we moved in together and got our own place. We got our dog at that point. If you're watching this, you've seen him come. He'll be back. If you hear a little pitter patter or bark or somebody drinking water, that's him. That's Carlton. He's our baby boy.
Yeah, Carlton is a pug, and we fell very hard into the pug life. We actually ended up getting a second pug about a year and a half after we got Carlton. We adopted her from Korea. Her name was Kimchi. She has since passed on to the next realm, but her beauty and her zen stays with us always. We love these little adorable wrinkled fur sacks so much. And I really thought that, Lauren wanted a dog. I wasn't really sure about it. And at one point she goes, yeah, well, you're not the one who sits at home alone every night, because I was out doing comedy pretty much every single night. And I was like, okay, I do not have an argument against that. And she said, well, what kind of dog would you like? And pugs always made me laugh. So I said, okay, let's look at pugs. And you fell in love very quickly. We went to a couple adoptions.
I mean, we went to one adoption like, immediately, especially like the old pugs are like the best pugs, in my opinion. Just like, they're sweet and they're just so chill. Well, I mean, our pug's not that chill, but most pugs are chill. And they're also great dogs for our lifestyle, right? We live in an apartment. There's not a lot of nature to go let them run in the nature.
Yeah. And I was worried because at the time I'm like 28, 29, that like Lauren's going to want to start having kids at some point, and I'm not ready to start having kids. So like, if I get this dog, then she won't want to have kids. And then one of my friends was like, no, Alex, you've got that totally backwards. A dog is a gateway drug to children. And I was like, all right, well, let's see what happens here. And yeah, we spent years like just traveling around. We had a great group of friends going to a lot of music festivals, like you said. And my comedy career was going pretty well. And then, so how did we get to the point where all of a sudden we were like, wait, children?
So I will say for myself, I never really pictured myself as a mom growing up. Like I played with dolls and whatnot, but like, once I got into my teens, I really just was like, oh no, I don't think kids are for me. Like I like adults. I was hanging out with, I'd always hang out with the adults in my family. And so it just never was something I imagined as I got older. I was like, I like my lifestyle. I'm going to be like the creative, arty aunt. I'll help take care of family kids and then give them back. But then you completely changed my mind with one conversation.
I do remember this. I don't remember what happened. I know we were fighting. I don't remember the circumstances, but something happened. It was the middle afternoon. We're in our West Hollywood apartment, and we were just having an argument. And I remember you were crying, and at some point you just said, I feel like you are waiting around for your career to take off so you can leave me. And oof. That struck me to my fucking core. Like, I just felt just this massive knockout punch hit me in all of my feelings. And I stood there just crying, and I said, leave you? I don't want to leave you. I want to have a family with you, which you weren't expecting me to say that at all. And I think you were like, what? You've never said that before. And I was like, I don't know if I've ever really felt it before as strong as I do right now, but yeah, I want to have children with you.
And I was like, this guy wants to have kids, like, and I immediately saw you as like the great dad you will be,
That's good to know, considering we were throwing parties and doing a lot of drugs at the time. I mean, not irresponsibly, I will say. We're very good at it.
Just like party drugs, like once a month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're not hanging out of a gutter with a needle in our arm. We're young. We're living.
But yeah, so it just like really kind of changed the way I thought about it. And I was like, well, that could be fun. Like you and me having a kid together. Yeah, let's do this.
Right. Like what could we make here? We both have good personalities and good energy, and we obviously have great families and wonderful friends. Like maybe it's time to start thinking about this.
And I was like, wait, hold on, sir. I want to get married.
Right. Which we at the time, now we'd been together over a decade. Carlton does not want to get married.
Pause for...
No. Just keep it going. It's fine. Okay. We've been together for over a decade at this point, but we were not married. And a lot of that came from me. I will say it. I had a bad view on marriage, mainly because my mom and stepdad were both divorce lawyers. So my mom had been married twice. My dad had been married 3 times. I just didn't have a good view on marriage. And Lauren's mom is also a divorce lawyer as well. So between us, we had 3 divorce lawyers in our family. And I was like, what's good about marriage? Why would anyone do this?
I was like, well, look at our friends. Why do we have to look to our parents as examples? Because no offense, but I don't want to be like my parents. They, lived in Cleveland and had a life that isn't one that I wanted for myself.
We already weren't living the life that our parents lived. Like, my parents never left their home state either. I mean, other than traveling, but they stayed in Maryland their whole lives. And your parents stayed in Cleveland their whole lives. So we were like, okay, you were like, look at our friends. And I was like, these are the examples we should be looking at. And suddenly I was like, okay, I think I can turn my brain on to getting married here. Like, you are who I want to be with. So what's the difference if we, get the government involved and sign a piece of paper and make it officially official? But, it still took me a couple months to really get on board and figure out, okay, well, we've been together this long. How am I going to propose? Eventually what happened is a friend of ours, very close friend, was turning 40 years old, and he was having his birthday in Hawaii. And there was a big group of us going. There were 14 of us going on this trip. And I was like, okay, this is the time to do it. Right?
Yeah. We'd have this conversation. I basically whispered in your ear, like, talk to Holly, talk to my sister Holly. Because one, I wanted a family ring, and I knew she'd be good at planning everything. Whenever it comes to anything, I'm like, just what do I want for Christmas? Ask Holly. It's the easiest way to get any sort of insight into my brain if you're not sure what you need is to go to my sister. But so ahead of this trip, I had considered, this would be a good time to propose. But my sister who was going on this trip with us, had not instructed me to get a manicure ahead of time. And we've always had a conversation that if someone's about to get engaged, one of her friends should tip her off and have her go get a manicure ahead of time, because there's so much looking at your hand. There's so many photos of your hand that you want to, put your best hand forward.
Yes, put your best hand forward. I like the way you said that.
So because Holly did not instruct me to get a manicure before we left, I assumed it was absolutely not happening during this trip.
Right. And I was fully on board. Like, I had actually called your dad to tell him that I was going to, not so much to ask, where you you have to take this step of make sure you ask the father. But I did call to tell him, and I was kind of afraid that what he would say. But at this point, your family had accepted me. They'd spent so much time around me. They accepted my life as an entertainer and a comedian. But I honestly, when I called your dad, I had never called him in our entire relationship. I think he probably thought that you were dead. Yeah. There was nothing good to be coming from this, because there's no way Alex is going to call to ask for her hand. But I did. And yeah, I checked in on this trip to Hawaii. The only people that knew I was going to do this were our friend Jeff, who was having his birthday, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't stepping on some sort of ceremonious thing. And of course, he was so supportive because he loves us both so much. And then Holly knew about it as well. But the entire time we were in Hawaii, the weather was atrocious. It was so bad. You think of Hawaii of just sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. And yeah, there were rainbows because it rained the entire fucking trip. So I just remember that kayaking trip we did go on it, but even the people at the center that were renting us kayaks were like, are you guys sure you want to do that? There's no one else out in the water. It's just so windy. It's cold. We're freezing. And we're like, no, we're in Hawaii. We must do this trip. And it's pretty much just stayed like that the entire time.
Yeah.
So the day we actually got engaged, do you want to set that up a little bit?
Yeah. So the plan, our friend Jeff, who organized this whole trip for 14 people, get you a friend who will do that you then just Venmo money. Also rented like a 15 passenger van and then drove that around with all of us in it when we went to Kauai. So the plan for the day was to get in the van, be driven, all around and go to like the different waterfalls and just sort of interesting spots on the island, just sort of be driving around. So I'm going, okay, well, I'm going to be bopping around in the back of this van all day long. One of our friends offered us a weed edible, and weed is not my thing. It just doesn't work good on my brain.
It does not work good on my brain.
It does not. It just makes me like more anxious, and it just makes my thoughts spin. So it's just, it is not my drug of choice by any means. But, I was like, well, we're just going to be in this van. Like, why not? So I took like a 5 milligram edible. That is probably the very last time I took an edible.
Definitely is. And I have been very good at weed my entire life. I've been smoking pot since I was 14 years old. So I just took a 10 milligram like it was nothing. I mean, which I do, I've been a daily smoker for most of my life. So for me, weed is nothing. I didn't even think about you taking 5 milligrams like, oh, this might actually affect you to the point where you're actually stoned and feeling it. Where for me, 10 milligrams, that's just a walk in the park. Like, I'm not feeling anything from that. So we are on this dock in Hanalei Bay. We're just peering out on the pier over this vast gray expanse. It's very picturesque, but the weather's not cooperating. And I just kind of was like, okay, it's not going to get better than this. So now's my time. And so I'll never forget this. Because it was so wet on the dock, I didn't get down on one knee. I squatted and asked you to marry me. You were quite taken aback. I didn't think about, because you were stoned, that you were not really in the same headspace that you normally would have been, which normally you are just super clear and in the moment. This one, you started crying instantly. You said yes, we embraced. And one of the best parts about being on this trip and doing this when nobody knew I was going to do it was that our friends saw it happen, and within seconds, we were surrounded by every single one of them in this giant hug. And it was just so warm, so wonderful.
Yeah, it felt overly surreal for me because of the weed edible. Like, if I would undo that part of it, just so I think it would have still felt surreal, but in a more in-body versus out-of-body kind of way. But yes, it was great. We had the best time. It was just the perfect way to celebrate in the perfect moment. And
yeah, and the only other people that were witness to this, by the way, were a group of drunk teenagers. They happened to just be like probably 15 years old, just getting loaded on this dock. And even they cheered. So I was like, hey, good. Teenagers are celebrating love. This is a beautiful moment. And then we went out to the soaking wet, muddy parking lot, listened to LCD Sound System, had a dance party. It was wet and kind of gross out and absolutely perfect. I love everything about that moment.
Me too. So that was January 2020. We all know what happens in March 2020. We had at that point done no wedding planning, made like no attempt to start any of it. So that we were lucky in that sense that like we didn't have to cancel any plans. I know a lot of people really sort of went through trouble there. So as 2020 goes on, I see all these people canceling their wedding. It's like no matter what part of the planning process they're in, it's like, oh, it's summer, we're canceling the wedding. Oh, it's fall. Oh, it's next year, we're canceling the wedding. And I realized there's going to be like this huge backlog of people wanting to get married. And I did not want to join that backlog. Like I wanted to get married in the next year or two. So I started looking at wedding venues in LA, found one I loved. They would not take our money. They would not take a deposit because they were still closed. With the shutdown, and they were owned by the city. So it was just not happening. And you and I finally had a discussion. Well, like, what if we did a destination wedding, right?
Yeah.
What if we went to Mexico? So we called our parents and talked to our friends, and basically everyone was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Especially at this point, it's early 2021 and everyone's like dying for a vacation. So everyone was on board. We found a great wedding planner in the Puerto Vallarta area. She really did pretty much everything. It was honestly good for me to like put the wedding somewhere else because it meant that like I didn't have so much control over it. Like if it had been in LA, I would have been like making all this stuff and just like trying to like do too much, where it really felt like, you know, I got to go and enjoy it and it was a vacation to me as well versus like all the nitty-gritty details of a wedding.
And a lot of times a destination wedding, you're just like, but there's so much added expense. But for our friends, they were happy to go to Mexico because we all on a vacation. And our families live on the East Coast in the Midwest. So they were going to have to fly to Los Angeles anyway. And going to Los Angeles is way more expensive than just going to Mexico. It was like a little bit cheaper, actually. It was cheaper for us to have the wedding there, but it was also cheaper for our families to just be like, hey, instead of going to LA and sitting in traffic and staying spread out through everywhere, what if we all went to one resort and we stayed there? And that alone, I mean, it just made our wedding so much more stress-free, because normally at a wedding, you have one day essentially, and you have all these people, and there's a lot of people there, of course, that you want, but there's also these random fringe characters where you're like, oh, this is my dad's business associate who I've never really met before, but I had to invite as an obligation, or this is a cousin that I haven't seen since I was 13, and we didn't have any of that. In fact, we had 3 full days leading up to our wedding where everyone was at this resort and got to know each other. So by the time we got to the actual wedding day, people were excited, but they were also comfortable. Nobody was on edge anymore, including us. We knew we could relax a little bit, being that we had already been there for a few days.
We did a welcome party on Thursday. We did karaoke on the beach, which was just so fun. That was at the resort. And then the wedding was off resort. It was just this great little spot of like a grassy hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Punta Mita. And it was just like perfect. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was a really fun party, and it was also sweet. And then we had some moments that were, you know, very us as a part of it.
Very much so. I mean, Lauren had a rule that we were not going to have any stand-up comedy at the wedding. And then we did this couples routine where I was the straight man and she was the ridiculous one, playing all these famous comedians throughout time. And nobody in our family or friend group expected us to do that, like basically switching places. Because normally I'm the outlandish one who's acting a fool, and you are much more grounded than I am. And we switched places. It was awesome. We had a great dance floor. I mean, it was a serendipitous event. Whales showed up to our wedding, uninvited, by the way. They were not on the guest list.
There were literally whales like jumping and breaching right after our ceremony. And of course, my mother was like, oh, that must be good for fertility. Thanks, Mom.
Foreshadowing once more.
Yes, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, so we have this amazing wedding, and when we get back to the States, now we got married April 9th, 2022, and we already had some plans coming up because we stayed in Mexico an extra few days. We don't call it our honeymoon, but it was basically just our decompression. We went to a different resort, and we just stayed there for a few extra days, and it was fantastic. It was lovely. But when we got back, we had a couple of music festivals to go to. The first one was at the end of April, which was the Desert Hearts Festival, something that we have produced comedy for many years. We bring a team of people out there. It's a camping festival. The Desert Hearts crew have become very close to us, and they really just kind of allow us to do our thing out there. And it's one of those festivals that just the best people show up, and it's always a good time. But at this festival, I just started to by the end of it, I was a wreck and my skin was really in bad shape. And one thing you should know about me is I've had autoimmune issues my entire life, and it manifests through my skin. So it is a constant battle with how my skin is doing. I'm always on some new medication, trying some different treatment. Doctors have been absolutely baffled about what to do with me my entire life. It's 10 out of 10. And so my skin started really acting up. And when we got back from Desert Hearts, I was pretty fucked. I did not feel good at all. It took me a few days to really get back to status quo.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Is it like a party hangover? Is it, festival flu? Because you when you go to a music festival, you know you're going to come back not feeling great. Like it's what you sign up for. So it wasn't like red flags yet.
No, definitely not. But then, right after Desert Arts, we have another festival to go to 1 month later, Memorial Day weekend, Lightning in a Bottle, one of our absolute favorite festivals to go to. This is a place where it's just the best people, amazing music, like big artists and wonderful art. So many of our friends go. Like a few of our friends go to Desert Hearts. All of our friends go to Lightning in a Bottle. We have a huge crew there of like 40 people usually. And so Saturday of Lightning in a Bottle, it starts on a Thursday. Saturday comes and I've made a decision that I am going to do what I call Tabber Day, which is when I take 2 tabs of acid at the same time on Saturday. And a bunch of our friends were like, yeah, Tabber Day, let's do Tabber Day. And then everyone bailed on this idea. And I said, no, I'm sticking to my convictions. I'm going to do it no matter what. So I take these 2 tabs and I just remember being like really starting to trip. And for some reason, I couldn't stop touching my neck. I had these weird lumps inside that were kind of had been like growing and then shrinking and then growing, and I could move them around and they didn't hurt, but they were definitely in there. And something about being on psychedelics, you cannot lie to yourself. And I just started getting kind of like nervous. I was having fun, but I was like, when I get back to LA on Monday, I got to take care of this. I got to figure out what the fuck is going on. And I knew immediately when I got back, I would have to make an appointment with my PCP.
Yeah, this is about when that story we shared at the top of the episode comes into play.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you hadn't said anything to me about your neck at that point, but I would say this was like days after Lightning in a Bottle that I noticed it.
Right. And the thing is, I've been kind of feeling it a little bit, but it's one of those things where because of my skin condition my entire life, I've had so many random staph infections and other infections that what happens when you get these infections is your lymph nodes will start swelling. And normally they just go away after a few days. But this had been well over a month now, and they were not going anywhere. So this is when I was like, all right, Alex, you really need to do something about this. So I went to my doctor and my PCP, not the drug. I've never done that one before. My primary care physician. And she took one look at me and immediately said, I think this might be lymphoma, but I'm not a specialist. You need to see somebody about this. And that was the first time I had heard the word. And I remember coming home and telling you lymphoma. And what were your thoughts?
I was immediately like, oh yeah, that's probably it. I started Googling like crazy because that's what I do. And it's interesting because you start to check all the boxes. It's like 37-year-old man, you know, you really were the prime case for lymphoma.
Yeah. And, but also you start like kind of looking back over the past few months at other signs. And one of the big signs that you mentioned was when we were preparing for the wedding, I had to buy a new suit and a button-down shirt, and you were going to order my shirt.
Yeah. I was ordering them for all the groomsmen, just so you guys, make it easy. And so I'd gotten their neck measurements, which is how you order men's dress shirts, right? They're sized by neck measurements. And I went to measure your neck and I was like, well, this is big. This seems larger than your friends who are of similar size. And I ordered your shirt and it was a big shirt. And I think I even sized down from what it said because I was just like, this doesn't make sense. He's not like that big of a guy. But it didn't occur to me that like, oh, why is his neck measurement so large? I just thought maybe I wasn't measuring it right. Maybe something was wrong there. But you can't see it in the wedding photos so much because you're wearing a jacket, but like that shirt was humongous on you.
Oh yeah. All my groomsmen were wearing shirts and I was wearing a tablecloth wrapped around me like I was about to go to a toga party. And those little things start to add up. Like I remember there was one day I was playing tennis with my friend Joe and he goes, are you working out? And I was like, no. And he goes, dude, because you look really ripped right now. Your neck is huge. And I was like, cool, I'm getting shredded out there. And I still didn't really know what was going on. But when my PCP said lymphoma, immediately that started an endless barrage of specialists and appointments, testing. I mean, it was a really difficult summer, and we'd only been married for 2 months when this all started.
Yeah. As a doer, as a planner, I had a perfect timeline for us, right? Get married in April, go to these music festivals, and then go to Burning Man at the end of the summer. It was something we'd done in 2018. I wanted to go back. There'd been a pandemic, all these reasons we couldn't go. And I was like, this is the year we're going. And then after we go to Burning Man, we're going to start having kids. Go to Burning Man, have kids. Natural progression of things.
Yes.
So our perfect summer is starting to fall apart. We spend a lot of time going to see doctors, driving around, going to specialists. Lymphoma is the thing that sticks in my head, but there were other things that were very much in consideration. Cancer, not cancer. It was months of not knowing, and that was the worst part.
Yeah, not knowing was awful because we knew something was wrong and every doctor was telling us something was wrong, but they took forever to figure out because they just had to keep doing different tests on me. And I will tell you, because basically they were trying to figure out what it was, and I had to do all of these different tests, blood work, MRIs. I did a bone marrow aspiration, which if you don't know what a bone marrow aspiration is, this was the worst of all the tests. Basically, 4 people came into a room, which immediately I knew, okay, something is about to go down. This procedure is going to hurt because 2 of the people were only there to hold me down while they did this test. And basically, they turn you over on your stomach. They take a needle that is the size, I mean, it's so big. It's like the size of a small stick. And they insert it through your hip to drive it into your bone so they can remove marrow and test it. And while they do numb your hip, there's no way to numb your bone. So when they hit it, my legs just started flailing, just going, and just kicking in the air. And the doctor, I'll never forget this. He goes, you have very hard bones, very hard bones. And I'm just like, thank you very much. It's one of my best qualities. I don't know what to do. And finally it was over. It took like 4 to 6 minutes, somewhere in there, of just the weirdest pain I've ever felt. At which point you came back in the room. And I mean, I was just a mess in there, just crying, letting all of my energy get released. It was such a novel and feeling that I'd never had before.
Yeah, that was really the worst time, the living in limbo. And it was like every step was more questions than answers. No, I have not considered head and neck cancer. Thank you very much. But apparently we're going to see a head and neck specialist.
Yeah. And I was just sleeping a lot. I would disassociate through every doctor's appointment because no matter what they told me, well, what if it was this? What if it was this? My brain just starts going, oh, okay, well, let me think about what that's going to do. Let me think about that future. Luckily, I had Lauren, my cancer concierge, who was there right diligently taking notes. Like she was the one who was aptly listening while my head was just attached to a balloon just floating through the air. It's the end of August. So I start getting tested on June 6th. That was the very first day I saw my PCP and she said, maybe it's lymphoma. So that was my first sign. And then it took until the very end of August to figure out finally, okay, what is this thing?
Meanwhile, we have canceled plans to go to Burning Man. As all this testing is coming through, as you are not feeling good, whatever's going on is meant for us not to go. So I go down my checklist of things I'm doing in my life. Okay, go to Burning Man. Scratch it out. Next up, have kids. Well, I guess I'm going to go see my gynecologist to get my IUD taken out. That I was probably June or July when that happened. And I got it taken out. It'd been in for 10 years anyway. I got my money's worth. It was time. So I'm also at this time reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts, as I'm sure you are too. And I started learning about cycle tracking, which is how you can tell if you're ovulating. You can tell things about your body just based on the natural signs it gives you. There's a couple of factors. You can check your basal body temperature, which is just your temperature in the morning before you wake up. I grab my thermometer every morning, check it, chart it. It can tell you whether or not you've ovulated. You can check your cervical mucus. That changes its consistency when you're about to ovulate. So that's another sign.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Because as a man, and I'm sure if there are other men listening to this, they have never heard the term cervical mucus. So can you explain a little bit?
Let's get into it. There is a fluid that comes out of the cervix through the vagina. It's really present all month long, but it changes consistency and it becomes more abundant when you're about to ovulate, because what it does, it's like a natural lubricant that makes it easier for the sperm to swim through, right? So when you're most fertile, it's this like egg white consistency, and it makes it easier for the sperm to swim all the way through the cervix up to where the egg is.
There are so many fluids that our bodies make that I just don't even think about. So, okay, cervical mucus, got it.
Yes.
All right, so you're checking that to make sure that you are ovulating, or for your ideal ovulation period, I guess.
It's a sign that your ovulation is coming. So it was one of those things where I was like, hey, let's give this a try. My IUD's gone. I know I know these signs are going on. Let's just do it today and do it tomorrow and see what happens. And I don't remember us having a conversation about this. I'm sure we did, but
I definitely don't remember. But then again, I'm going through some other shit.
Right. I didn't trick you. You were at no point where you tricked.
No, I'm sure I wasn't. That's not really your style.
No.
Like that's something I do. Like I like trickery and foolishness. That's not really who you are. You're pretty matter of fact.
Yeah. So we're like, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens.
I remember getting a call on to come into the doctor's office. It was a Wednesday, right in the smack dab in the middle of Burning Man.
Yes, this was the week we would have been at Burning Man.
Yeah, on a Wednesday, get a call, go into the office. I sit down and my oncologist comes in and he says, all right, we have an answer. Stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And then he said, this is what we were hoping for, which is the most peculiar phrasing when you just told someone that they have stage 3 cancer. Because, no, I wasn't hoping for this at all. This is not what I was hoping for. I hope much higher. I was not hoping I had swollen lymph nodes. I was hoping a nymph would swallow my loads. Right, Lauren, up top? Hey, all right, cool, great. So what a weird thing to say, but now we have an answer. Stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma, not stage 4, which I was convinced it was going to be because my body does nothing in moderation. I don't do anything in moderation. I always go to the extreme. But yeah, stage 3 basically meant, yes, it was started in my neck and it moved through my body down to my pelvis, but it was not in my bones. So stage 3, okay. Here's the treatment plan. Luckily, we know what to do with Hodgkin's lymphoma. You are a young, healthy male. My prognosis was very good. It was like 95% cure rate. And even still, I was like, I'm going to be that 1 in 20, dude. Watch this. I'm going to be the one that fucking dies from this. Here we go. But what's the treatment plan?
They want to move fast. You have to do a few more tests. You also have to freeze sperm, which we will get into in the next episode. But that was a whole adventure in and of itself. Meanwhile, this week that you get your diagnosis, I realize I'm not sleeping very well. I'm getting sort of bursts of energy before I go to bed at night. I also realized that my period should be coming. I'm tracking, so it's not like I missed it. But I was like, oh, it should come today. Okay, it didn't come today. Okay, I guess I'm a day late. I guess I'm going to buy a pregnancy test. So this is now Friday that week. I buy the pregnancy test. I decide, I'm going to take it after work. Like I have to get stuff done today. No matter what this pregnancy test says, it's going to derail my productivity for the day. So I save it for later. And all of a sudden it's Friday afternoon. You're getting ready to go out for the night. You have shows.
Yeah, I had 2 shows that night.
And I'm like, wait, I'm going to take this pregnancy test. Like, don't leave me here on my own. But so I go in the bathroom, shut the door, wait my 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I don't really know what she's doing in there. I have no idea that you're in there taking a pregnancy test. So I'm literally sitting at the kitchen table going, okay, Alex, you have cancer. You have cancer. What are you going to do? What does life look like? Are you going to lose your hair? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then you emerge from the bathroom.
And we'll get into what happens next in the next episode.
Oh, good. Let's leave them on a cliffhanger.
A cliffhanger.
I like that.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Hopefully kidding.